can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so today's video, we're gonna be talking about X-Men number 22 by Jerry Duggan and Joshua Cassara. So this issue is all about what Orchis has planned for the X-Men coming up for this year's Hellfire Gala event, and even some things that they have been working on even prior to that. Some things that are revealed in this issue that has basically let us know that Orchis isn't resting on their hands. We also see in this issue the return of Omega Sentinel, a character we haven't really seen a whole heap of a lot of since Jonathan Hickman's Inferno, which I think really the last time we saw her in any meaningful capacity. Following the reveal that she comes from an alternate timeline, one that is seemingly unaffected by Moira's so many lives. A timeline that is unlike anything that Moira has ever talked about. Moira talks about all her different lives. She says that the mutants always lose, but in Omega Sentinel's alternate timeline, the mutants always win. So what is it exactly that Orchis has in the Instapot just waiting for the X-Men to take down Krakoa and mutant kind as a whole? Well, first and foremost is they have been meddling with Krakoan medicines. The Krakoan drugs, 3 of which were thrown into rotation, one that could cure pretty much any disease that would afflict humankind, another that could extend human life by up to 5 years, and then another one that was used to cure ailments of the human mind. This is a very interesting development considering everything going on right now with Krakoa and its Krakoan medicines being accepted and rejected depending on what country or nation we're talking about. We know that the United Kingdom is backed out of their deal as of a year and some change ago with Krakoa, meaning they no longer get Krakoan medicines, and we've seen as recently as Wolverine number 33 just this past week that Beast is going after countries who aren't accepting Krakoan medicine, destroying their supply chains and disrupting supply lines to make it to where they have to rely on Krakoan medicine. So all of this going on right now is pretty interesting when we take into consideration that Dr. Stasis and MODOK have been tampering with those Krakoan medicines that affect the human mind. As we saw back in X-Men number 8, when MODOK was working on what was referred to as Project Amy, or what is in reference to the amygdala. This was a process that he was using to tamper with human minds and turn them into rabid animals, effectively taking control of their fight or flight response. We saw in that issue MODOK take over an entire cruise ship full of humans and turn them into ravenous animals. We learned shortly after that that Orchis had reached out to MODOK and brought him in and made him one of the pedals of their organization, basically meaning he is a high-ranking official in Orchis, and they couldn't have picked a crazier or even more intelligent supervillain to do the job, because he has come up with a way, with the help of Dr. Stasis, to take that very same program he was putting together and put it inside of those Krakoan medicines to where they can emit a signal, one that literally is so low that almost no one could really tell that they were hearing it. Unleashing that signal activates the fight or flight response and will cause that person to either run off a cliff, as we see in this issue, a man literally running into his high-rise apartment's window repeatedly until it breaks, throwing himself out of the building to his death. And in other cases, Orchis could use this to turn them into ravenous warriors that would rip apart and destroy anything in their path, regardless of whether it's in their best interest or not. We also know that Orchis has access to Krakoan gate technology right now, and this has been kind of the biggest thing for Orchis. They've been working toward this for a while, and we've kind of seen some hints and glimpses that Orchis had figured out a way to manipulate the Krakoan gates. We saw this in Legion of X because Nimrod had infected the island with himself by using Warlock as kind of a backdoor way into Krakoa's infrastructure. For those who don't understand or know what I'm talking about, back in Powers of 10 number 4 back in 2019, when we were shown a flashback of Professor X bringing Cypher to Krakoa for the first time after he realized what he wanted to do to turn Krakoa into the new home for mutant kind, Cypher had unleashed Warlock, a small piece of him mind you, across the entire island. So Krakoa and Warlock are actually intrinsically tied to one another. And if Nimrod was able to infect Warlock, that gave him access to Krakoa, and we learned at the end of Legion of X number 10 that this was exactly the case. Nimrod had hacked Krakoa's gates, and with one of the villains, Opal from Horde culture, what I always effectively called the Golden Girls of X-Men villains, they had also figured out a way to hack Krakoan gate technology even before Nimrod did. But it was one of those things that just kind of got left on the cutting room floor. It never really got talked about because Horde culture never really had a reason to use it. This was all stuff that got sussed out around the time of Al Ewing's Empire from like 2020 or 2021. Well, Horde culture has turned over that technology to Orchis as well. So now Orchis has access to this, and this isn't the first time we've seen Horde culture work with Orchis. We've also seen them do this during the events of Jonathan Hickman's Inferno as well, so none of this is brand new or anything like that. This is just basically carrying on the relationship they've always had, though in Inferno it was heavily implied that only one of them was effectively working with Orchis, not the entire group. But in this case it's kind of more of the same. It's just one person just doing a thing because Omega Sentinel may have some leverage over her. Another thing that we have taken notice of is that Orchis has put up little pop-up clinics across the world, and more specifically in New York in this instance, where we see that a new character by the name of Woofer, if the name sounds weird, it's because it's short for Subwoofer. Woofer is a mutant who would be classified as a Morlock, but his power allows him to transform light into sound. Think of him as the reverse of Dazzler. Dazzler has the exact same ability, but going in the opposite direction. She turns sound into light. Woofer is wanting to have his X gene suppressed so that he can start to look normal again. These Orchis pop-up clinics give the promise that they're going to be able to give you a drug that can suppress the X gene, but in truth, it actually doesn't. What they're doing is they're experimenting on these mutants. They're not actually doing what they're advertising, and this is what leads to the X-Men coming in busting up their operation. But the thing that's revealed here in all this that I think is even more noteworthy than, you know, all the other stuff is the fact that Orchis, well, yes, we've had Fei Long over on the Invincible Iron Man side of things creating new Stark Tech Sentinels that are now online and are in rotation. We're gonna see them during the upcoming Hellfire Gala event most likely, but we've also seen that Orchis has created X-Sentinels. Now, these Sentinels are unique in that they're not the large hulking brutes of Sentinels we're used to seeing. These are actually smaller, more human-sized Sentinels, and these are Sentinels that are all created out of the adamantium skeleton of Wolverine. Every time that Wolverine has died since House of X, all these adamantium skeletons have been picked up from over the time since House of X. Every time Wolverine has died and his body has not been recovered, Orchis has stepped in, taken that body, and they've repurposed it and turned it into a killing machine, a type of robotic Weapon X in the form of a Sentinel, complete with adamantium claws and all the invulnerability that entails, and all under the control of Orchis, and they are designed to hunt, track down, and kill mutants. What should make these Sentinels even more terrifying is the fact that they are made out of adamantium means they are near indestructible, and to showcase just how strong this one X-Sentinel is, Firestar has to unleash the full power of her microwave manipulation capabilities in order to incinerate this thing enough to stop it dead in its tracks. This is not something Firestar can do around other people, meaning that if Orchis is to unleash these Sentinels at the next Hellfire Gala or at any other area where there's a large population of human beings, it means there's always going to be the risk that Firestar could potentially kill someone if they're in the vicinity of her microwave blast when she's trying to take one of these guys down. Now, what makes this interesting is that over the course of this comic, Forge asks Cyclops a question: how many times has Wolverine died and his skeleton not been recovered? Because that has been kind of a sticking point for a lot of people. A lot of people have often asked the question, what happens with certain characters when they die? Do they just leave their bodies out there for someone to recover and you run off with? Who knows? We even saw over the course of Benjamin Percy's Wolverine series that the Auction House, a company that operates in selling superhero and supervillain memorabilia, we saw recently in that series that the Auction House had access access to one of Wolverine's hands, complete with adamantium claws. We've also seen Wolverine carelessly bleed and wipe it away and throw it on the ground, and the new G-Engineer picking up that very same handkerchief that Wolverine used with his DNA all over it. He's taken that and used it to create clones of Wolverine. And we've also seen Beast create clones of Wolverine, some that have died and some, while Beast does tend to try to recover them, we have seen in one particular instance he's lost one and not been able to recover it, and that one fell into the hands of Maverick. So far as I know, kind of going back over what I remember of all the X-Men comics that have come out since House of X, the one time I can think of off the top of my head where Wolverine's been killed and his body was not able to be recovered was during House of X #4. That was the issue where they made the suicide run on the Orchis base to try and take down the Mother Mold. In that instance, Wolverine was killed, his body was never recovered. Now, we also know from Jonathan Hickman's Inferno that the X-Men have staged multiple missions trying to infiltrate Orchis base, and all of them have been unsuccessful. And in a lot of those cases, Wolverine was used as one of the operatives and he died on that base, and we've even seen his body and his skeleton hanging up in the Orchis labs in more than a couple of different iterations. So when at the end of this book, when they make the revelation that they have 10 adamantium skeletons, it's safe to say that he's died at least 10 times and they did not recover his skeleton. And not only that, but they're finding ways to turn the X-Sentinel into more of a Terminator than anything else. They're going to put flesh on these adamantium skeletons, these X-Sentinels, to make it capable of infiltration. This is basically bringing Terminator to the X-Men universe. I mean, even though technically they've had that before, but this is something I think that might actually be worse. We'll have to wait until July the 26th before we actually see everything that's going to happen. We've already gotten some sneak previews of stuff that's going to be happening with the Hellfire Gala during Free Comic Book Day, Avengers X-Men #1, just this past a couple of Saturdays ago. And yeah, this is going to be insane. Right now, Orchis has everything. We already know that they have an operative who's going to go into the treehouse, destroy the X-Men's base, and steal the Captain Krakoa outfit. We also know this person is going to go walk into the Capitol, the United States Capitol, and kill multiple politicians and effectively wage war on the United States. And of course, there's also the Stark Sentinels I mentioned earlier that Fei Long has been producing, using Tony Stark's old Stark company to do it. And yeah, right now, man, it is looking pretty grim. We know this is the fall of X era and that the X-Men are supposed to take a huge L before this is all said and done, but right now those L's are stacking up, and man, I don't think Orchis is done yet. I think there's more. I think we just haven't seen it yet. But right now the dominoes are being set up and Orchis has Moira sitting right there, ready to thump the first one and watch all of them fall. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, do the YouTube thing, like, share, comment, subscribe. And if you want to make sure you don't miss out on any videos, make sure you tap that notification bell so you never miss anything. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and let me know what you thought about X-Men #22 and how screwed do you think the X-Men are come July 26th. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.